All right, well, Andy Raymond, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. Really looking forward to having a chat with you.
My pleasure, Will. Yeah, looking forward to it too, mate.
Look, I've been watching, well, listening rather, to your podcast of late, and I've become a big fan. I came across it a few months ago, and I think it's a really good motivation behind it. I really love that you're giving a voice to the players. I think that so much of NRL media at the moment is kind of past players or media pundits giving their opinion, but you kind of go the other route. You actually dig deep and get an understanding of what the players actually think about the game and the various things that are going on in the game. So I'd love if you could talk a little bit about what you've been doing with the podcast and the motivation behind starting it.
Mate, despite the fact I've been in the game and in the media for 32 years, I don't think anyone's interested in my opinion on who the top eight will be or my opinion on who the best halfback is. I don't think anyone's interested in me telling someone else's story. So the way I've gone about the podcast is the players tell their story. I'm just giving them the platform. And it doesn't matter if it's a short story with a current player or a long story with, one of the legends of the game. Nothing better than hearing one of the legends tell their story. And one that really sticks out is South Sydney and Rugby League icon Bobby McCarthy, who was part of that wonderful South Sydney side in the late 60s, early 70s. He was coached by the little master, Clive Churchill, a name synonymous with rugby league. And I'm sitting down with Bobby, who I've known for a long, long time, but Bob's telling firsthand stories about Clive Churchill. And you can't and you don't hear that type of stuff anywhere else. Sure, we can all look on Google, we can look on Wikipedia and tell a Clive Churchill story, but we're hearing firsthand stories about guys, dating almost all the way back to World War II. And I reckon that's the cool part of what we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's something that probably rugby league has been missing a little bit is a direct platform that allows the players to voice their opinions, and you can talk about things that you probably can't talk about maybe on Fox Sports or on Channel 9 or whatever it might be. I watched, or rather listened to, a conversation with Tim Manor the other day and talking about his relationship with Jared Hayne and some of the stories there, and that's just something that couldn't be touched in the media at the moment because of things that have gone on. And I guess that goes to the whole philosophy of Unfiltered. It's just genuine people having genuine conversations.
Unfiltered doesn't mean that I swear constantly or that the guests swear constantly. It's not unfiltered in that respect. But from my perspective, all my time in the media, whether it was Channel 7 early days or Fox Sports, I would have one or two producers and a director giving me suggestions and directions on what I was to do, what I was to ask, how long I had to go. It might be, 2 questions in 45 seconds, or you've got 4 minutes and you've got to finish on, such and such a wording so the telecast can keep going. So although I had a lot of free reign and very grateful for the free reign I had over the years and the trust I had with my workmates, there was always parameters around what I did and how I did it. With the podcasting and with the unfiltered branding, if I want to, I can put up 30 podcasts a week, or I can put up one a month. They can go 2 minutes, they can go 5 hours. I can talk about whatever topic we choose or whatever topic the guests choose. There's no limitations, there's no filters. And I'm not going to say mastered the art. I'd love to be able to master the art, but I've learnt the art, and I've learnt to appreciate the importance that when you are doing an interview, your guest is the most important person in the room, not you. Otherwise, you don't need a guest. So I treat my interviews with that. Sure, I do my homework. Sure, I've got a list of bullet points. But if one of my questions in their answer goes in a certain direction, well, I follow that direction. I'm letting them tell their story. So, yeah, the unfiltered side of it's not necessarily a couple of potty mouths just sitting down and F this and F this and F this. It's just the fact that there's no rules. Do as we please to a degree, I guess.
Are you enjoying that? Is that a new challenge for you to kind of step away from the traditional media, which you spent so long doing? Does it make it a lot more exciting to try this new sort of format, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I've always really enjoyed the storytelling aspect of journalism or commentary or rugby league. So it's not a huge shock. The huge shock has been the volume of social media that I have to do to get the podcast out there. 2 days before the first episode was to launch, I'd never edited audio in my life, and I'm a tech dummy. And that was a huge challenge in itself. I'm not like you young blokes that can just pick up the computer and whip up a graphic or edit some video or audio. This old dog had to learn a few new tricks. So there's certainly been some, huge challenges. But I've got it to a point where I'm pretty streamlined and time efficient at the moment. There's always other projects going on, whether I'm doing some rugby league for Triple M, whether I'm doing some boxing for Stan event, whether I'm hosting corporate events, whether I'm taking the dog down the beach for a walk, whatever it may be. There's always other things in my life, but we've got it down to be pretty time efficient with the podcast at the moment. It's just, it's coming up with a new way to do each interview that is the challenge, I think. None of our episodes are the same. None of our episodes are even remotely the same in terms of format, topic, content. So that's always a challenge, but a cool one.
Yeah, it definitely shows that. That's one thing I really enjoy, the variety, not just in the guests and that you're getting so many guests on for some of your super shows, but then also the variety between episodes and the music kind of cutting in and out between some of the advertisements. It makes it really entertaining.
It's different, and it may seem arrogant, and I don't mean it to sound like that. I mean it to sound confident. We do what's called the Rugby League Super Pod every week during season, where you can hear 12 interviews with past or present players every episode, and I will back that against anything else anywhere, whether it's television, radio, or any other podcast. You just can't hear that anywhere else in 45 minutes. And it might be one guy talking about his teammate, another guy talking about debut game or his favorite game. It might be someone giving us a tip on the best chicken palmy they've ever had and why it was so good. There is a range of different topics, and I reckon the Super Pod is super cool.
I definitely agree. How is it that you get all these players? Is it just relationships that you've built over your time in the previous media careers?
That's exactly what it is. I always and prided myself in always doing the right thing as a person, not so much as a journalist, but just as a person. I'm honest. As a person, I'm loyal. And I was honest and loyal to myself over the course of my career with Channel 7 and Fox Sports. And I was honest and loyal to the players, and they respect and appreciate that. And as a result, when I'm calling in favors from the relationships that I've built, these guys are only too happy to take, an hour out of their family life and help out an old mate. So it's been cool.
That's awesome. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you kind of got started in broadcasting and in all the media work that you do. How did it actually all begin?
Dad was a motor racing commentator, the voice of motorsport for many decades across, I guess, the 70s, 80s and 90s at Channel. He was also the sports boss at Channel 7. And I did work experience twice at Channel 7 officially, but unofficially I had been going up to Channel 7, which was only 15 minutes from home back in the day, every weekend pretty much I'd make coffee, I'd print off scripts, I'd go and get the lunch, I'd clean cars, whatever it was.
The fun
And when
job.
the fun jobs. And when all that was finished, I'd sit down and watch. And I might be a lot of things, but one thing I certainly am is a sponge. And I watch and listen. I'm a good listener, and I absorb what I see, both the good and the bad. And I had some wonderful guys that would allow me just to sit there, the back of the room, and watch what they did and how they did it. And I was enthusiastic. So when the opportunity came out of school, I got the start because Dad was the boss. Simple as that. But I had been in and around that newsroom and that sports room for probably 5 or 6 years. Everyone knew me. They knew what type of young bloke I was. They knew I was going to have a red hot crack at it, and they took the gamble.
I think that's a real credit to you that even though your dad was already in a position that allowed you to break into the career perhaps more easily than you otherwise would have, the fact that you've gone on with it and made it your own and actually stuck hard at it and worked hard is, I think a lot of people in your position could easily have just rested on their laurels, but you built, you created a name and you really worked hard to making sure you didn't just take it for granted.
Well, I've never taken it for granted. And up until, even current day, we're just planning doing a big pay-per-view boxing at the moment in November, and it's going to be huge. And the way I see it, it's my privilege to be in your lounge room for, a couple of hours on a Saturday. And I've always seen it in that respect. And the other thing I've always been mindful of is it's more than just sport. It's an entertainment package. And it doesn't matter if it's rugby league, if it's boxing, if it's motor racing, it's an entertainment package. It's more than sport. Now, not everyone watching has had a great week. Not everyone watching has the same knowledge. You might have some people watching a rugby league game for the first time. You might have Hall of Famers watching the rugby league. My job, I thought, was to make you forget about your day-to-day worries, whether it's relationship worries, money worries, whatever. My job was to make you forget about that and just relax and enjoy a bit of sport on the TV. And I could have done that through stats, through a story, through a couple of my shocking jokes that I've told over the years. But just to make the viewer forget about their hassles day to day. And I've lived with that for 32 years and really proud of it. And I think I've, to a large degree, achieved that.
You definitely have. I think that's the beauty of sport, and I think why we as Australians love it so much, that it's an escape from everything else that's going on in life. It boils life down to just basic competition, kind of like some primal instincts of win-loss, supporting your team, moments of triumph. It gives you those like Rocky Balboa moments that you think could only happen in movies, yet somehow on a Saturday night it can happen in front of your eyes, and you as the commentator, whether it's boxing or rugby league or motorsports, give voice to those amazing moments and leave the imprint in people's minds.
It is, and look, I'm a sports nerd and have been since I was born. But we were talking about this just a couple of weeks ago with a few mates. If you didn't have a passion for sport, what would you actually cheer and get excited about in life day to day? Sure, family achievements, and that's a given. But what would you get emotional about, excited about? What would you celebrate? What would you get frustrated? It's a wonderful vehicle sport, and the emotion, the tribalism, the passion from our side of the playing field. I love it, mate. I love it.
And it brings people together as well. It doesn't just make you happy. The camaraderie, if you go to the pub on a Friday night to watch the footy, the conversations you have, the banter you have, it brings people together like nothing else can. And if sport was missing, like it was for a few months, early 2020, there's a big void left in people's lives.
Yeah, certainly is. I mean, nothing better than we've all got a mate who's a Manly fan, and we're absolutely serving it up and sending him a dozen texts a day at the moment. What would you be able to, sledge your mates about apart from their bad golf swing?
Exactly.
I reckon it's great, and the banter it creates is sensational.
Definitely. I'm a Tigers fan, so I've been on the receiving end of a lot of it for about a decade, actually. So, yeah.
Fan, I share your frustrations, mate.
Maybe this year a bit more success for you guys at least.
Let's hope so.
Are there any highlights or stories from your time in media? Is there when people ask something that really jumps out that kind of encapsulates all your experiences? Is there one standout moment?
Probably not one standout moment. As I said, I'm a sports tragic, and to get into sports media, you have to be, and you have to have a team. You have to be a fan. And any commentator that says they don't have a team is telling fibbies. And I'm a mad Para fan, and I never hid that. In fact, I would mention it on Para games, and I would almost take the piss out of myself at different times if they weren't going so well. But I got to commentate in 2009, semi-final between Parramatta and the Dragons, and it was when Jarryd Hayne was at his finest and scored one of, if not the best tries in the history of the game. I got to call my team in a semi-final. Now, the only thing bigger than that is calling your team in a grand final. But so from a sports tragics point of view, I'll never, ever forget that. That was just sensational. And Jarryd and I, even last week, were talking about that game, that day, and the emotion surrounding it. On the other hand, for an adrenaline rush, being on the grid at the Bathurst 1000, 3 minutes before they start their engines, then jumping over the pit wall and watching that and hearing that and feeling the noise, that is awesome. I've done Bledisloe Cup games, where the pure emotion of the haka and the national anthem for both countries sends a shiver down your spine. A lot of it becomes a blur over the younger years, but mate, so many just terrific memories. There are. I could sit here all afternoon if I was prompted and I could remember everything. You wouldn't shut me up, Will.
Right. So you can tell even just in the way you explain that, the amount of passion you have for sport and for those moments. It definitely shines through in the commentary as well, let alone just now.
Mate, and there's been the indifferent ones where a good story was I have a bet on the footy, but I had a 4-leg multi going back a few years, and the last leg was a Monday night game. It was in Newcastle, and it was Melbourne to beat the Knights. And it was a good collect. And I always did sideline on Monday night for Fox Sports. And Melbourne was up by 10 with 2 minutes remaining. And so I'm celebrating on the sideline. My producer knew about my bet, and he's saying, well done. And I can just hear him in the earpiece over the commentary. Well, Newcastle, in something like 102 seconds, have scored 2 tries, converted 1, and Kurt Gidley had a kick from the sideline to win it right there, right then, and right in front of me.
Oh, no.
And what we used to have a lot more latitude on Monday night in terms of what we could do and what we could do with the players. And so the producer said to me as Gidley was lining up, mate, if he gets this kick, I'm going to turn your microphone on. The commentators are going to be quiet. You get in as close as you can, get as much audio and as much emotion and interviews as you possibly can, and go for as long as you want. And he had a bit of a chuckle and he said, I hope he gets it. And sure enough, he got it. So I've just lost a 4-leg multi for a really decent sum of money. And I had to go in to Kurt Gidley with a smile on my face with Newcastle Knights all around me and do that. How good was that? What are you feeling? So there's moments like that I can look back on and really giggle at as well.
Were you chirping in his ear when you were standing behind him, about to kick it?
A little bit of that one going on.
Yeah.
Aim to the left, watch the wind.
You said before that you obviously a Para fan. Do you also have favourites or follow particular boxers when you're commentating them, or is that a little bit more objective?
Yeah, probably a little more objective. I've built up a really good relationship with a lot of the boxers over the years, back to the late 90s. And I guess most notably Anthony Mundine and Danny Green. They're probably the bigger names. Really cool to be commentating your mate when things are going well. One of the most average nights that I've had was a night in Melbourne, and I cannot recall the opponent's name. But it was as Anthony Mundine was starting on the downslide of his boxing career, and he got smashed and he got put down 4 or 5 times. I'm sitting literally on the edge of the ring when I commentate, and the last 2 knockdowns happened right in front of me, and he sort of pushed his head up, and I were the first eyes that he saw, and we locked eyes. And to see your mate in that much distress and that much pain, I still think about that. That is the most brutal one that I've seen. And I've spoken about it with Chock, and I went into the dressing room afterwards, and I was emotional and I was upset, as was he. So whilst there's terrific nights and terrific celebrations and emotions, the night Danny Green won the world title, he beat Roy Jones inside the first round. I got to commentate that. Awesome, unbelievable. But yeah, the night Chock copped a flogging in Melbourne, that'll stay with me for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can imagine. You were mentioning before we started about Sonny Bill's upcoming fight. Are you what are your thoughts on a lot of the rugby league players like Sonny Bill, like Gallen, getting involved in boxing? I think nowadays perhaps less so, but when it first started, there was a lot of talk about, is this discrediting boxing? Is it ruining the sport? Are you very much on board? Do you like seeing them bring more eyes to boxing?
Well, that's what it does. It brings more eyes to boxing. Without Anthony, without Sonny, without Paul Gallen, boxing wouldn't be where it is today. And that goes back 22 years to when Anthony made his debut in the year 2000. It wouldn't have the prominence it does now. What I get disappointed at is some of the promoters don't use the rest of the show to sell boxing as I think they should. So sure, have Sonny Bill or have Paul Gallen or have Anthony Mundine as the headline act to try and introduce new sponsors, new supporters to the sport, but have an undercard that gets people excited and interested in more than just the main event. So the next time there's a fight night on, these same people say, you know what? I remember that young kid from the undercard last time. Let's take a look at it again. I think that's been actually quite poorly done over the years, which is a real lost opportunity.
Yeah, I've never really pictured it that way. I think it's really important, but I guess thinking back to some of the fights that I might not have watched a Paul Gallen fight card, for example, but then I might not have watched the undercard, but with Paul on the fight, I start watching it. And then now, these days, I'll go and I'll buy the pay-per-view for Harry Garside or a Nikita Zoo, and I'll watch them box. But I would never have, maybe Harry because of the Olympics, but definitely not Nikita. I wouldn't have known probably who he was or have gotten involved in his career without having watched Gallen's fights. So I think, it's a good way of putting it, that a lot of it rests on making sure that you've got some good fights in the undercard as well.
Yeah, exactly right. No, again, I think it's probably a bit of a lost opportunity, but there is still time because I think the crossover will continue. It's all the NRL players are, they're big, tough, fit guys, and that's what you need in boxing as well. So it's probably not a difficult transition for a lot of them.
Is there a particular fight in Australian boxing you'd love to see at the moment? Is there something you're really hoping the promoters can get together?
I think we'd all love to see Paul Gallen and Sonny Bill Williams. I still think it'll happen. Uh,
Mm.
I think it's only probably a couple of months away. Um,
Wow.
I don't think either of them are saying that at the moment, but maybe it's being optimistic on my part. Will, maybe it's just that, but that's probably the one I'd like to see at the moment. I think most of the other guys, the full-time boxers, careers going nicely, and what we got to remember, it's a business and it's an unregulated business. There is no one boss of boxing like there is with the UFC. So you can't expect to have the first and second best welterweights in the world fighting for a championship, because the truth is that just doesn't happen very regularly at all, because there are so many different organizations, so many different belts, so many different people making money, and no one regulator. Whereas Dana White has got the final say. He says, Will, Andy, you two guys are fighting, and if you don't like it, I'm going to rip up your contract and you're not getting any money.
Mm. Yeah, that's one thing where it's like, on one hand, I've really grown to enjoy the UFC because of exactly that. Every 3 months, there's a championship belt up for grabs, if not every month, in the different weight divisions, which is great. But then also, there's questions about how much control Dana White has, and is it a little bit too much control? Is he underpaying them? So it's kind of that give and take where, you know, it makes it difficult. But that's one thing where I think a lot of people, especially my age, coming into starting to watch boxing or UFC, a lot of them are going towards UFC, myself included. Not because boxing is doing anything wrong, just because of the best fights are always happening in the UFC and they're promoting them so well.
Mate, sidetracking a little bit, but to further explain that, I was away with the wife a couple of years ago, and we might have been in Thailand, and there was a boxing heavyweight title and a UFC heavyweight title on back-to-back days. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. Go and have a beer in Thailand and watch the fights.
Mm.
In the UFC, it was the number one versus the champion, as it should be. It's a world title. In boxing, it was the champion versus the 151st ranked heavyweight in the world.
No way.
And this was on the same weekend. And I said to the missus, this just sums up where both sports are at. We've got the two best in the UFC fighting each other, and we've got a pushover in the boxing. Same weekend, really, really crappy look for boxing that weekend.
Yeah, it goes to show. Do you think there's a path out to improve that sort of thing, or?
Mate, there is not. And if anything, boxing will only get worse in that the more organizations, the more titles, the more regional titles that mean absolutely nothing. You and I can go and register the Will Boxing Organization tomorrow, get a couple of $4,000 championship belts made up, and we could start going to promoters saying, for $6,000 sanctioning fee, you can fight for this title. And that it's a business. That is all it's about. So I think it's actually going to get worse in boxing. There is no way one governing body will ever work because it's just gone too far. And that's really sad, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is sad. So you can't see someone doing what Dana White's done in UFC for boxing.
Too many stakeholders earning, 8-figure sums. They just wouldn't let it happen.
It's so entrenched. Yeah, that is sad because I like both sports. But yeah, it's frustrating. But I mean, at least at least if you purely just enjoy some of the good fights, maybe not the title fights, if you just enjoy boxing for the fights that are on, there's still plenty of entertainment to be had.
Exactly right, and that's what I do, mate. I try and keep my mind clear of the frustrations and the aggravations of boxing. I really enjoy the moment the bell rings for the duration of the fight, the politics and the garbage and the BS that goes on in boxing. I couldn't care less about, but when it's fight time, I still love it.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. Changing track a little bit, going back to the footy, you said you're an Eels fan. I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's a pretty exciting final series coming up. I think it's one where, in the last few years, it's kind of been one or two teams where you think they can, Penrith or Melbourne or Roosters, it's going to be one of them. But something about this final series to me, I feel like there's a lot of teams that could win it if they have a good month of footy put together. Are you confident in the Eels, or do you think it's going to be someone else that takes it out?
I'd never use the word confident and Eels in the same sentence because I still recall 1986, and that is a bloody long time ago. That was our last one. The interesting thing about the final series was shown last year that we're all looking at the matchups for this week and the potential matchups and who's favourite. One upset this weekend turns the entire draw on its head, and that excites me because I think there will be an upset in the opening round. I either think 3 beats 2, 4 beats 1, 7 beats 6, or 8 beats 5. I don't know which one. I haven't looked, and I'll wait and check out teams closer to. But one upset changes everything, and you 2 good games, 2 good performances away from a GF, and then anything can happen. I'm really excited by it. I wasn't as convinced on the Cowboys as everyone else, and I think it's a huge step up for them. But the footy they're playing is just magnificent to watch. I think all 8 footy sides, you could mount a pretty decent argument that they've got what it takes to play in the grand final, and I reckon that's great.
I agree. Especially, you mentioned the Cowboys there. I mean, prior to this season, I was telling people that I could see Cowboys being wooden spooners, if not, definitely down the bottom. I had no vision that they would be even in the top 8, let alone the top 4.
Yeah, I fully agree. I've never predicted a wooden spooner in my life because I see it as negative and disrespectful. But I certainly wouldn't have had the Cowboys close to the top 8. And I think most people were a bit like us in our predictions. It doesn't happen every year. It probably happens every second or third year. But what a great story the Cowboys have been, that feel-good story of the season. Whether it's overachieved or surprised everyone, but it's been a really positive story. The whole of North Queensland's into it. Once again, their brand new stadium is absolutely packed every single week. The players look like they're enjoying. They're scoring cracking tries. Great story, the Cowboys. Great success story.
Definitely is, and hopefully some on your end, some success for Parramatta as well.
I would love it. I'll be if it happens, and when it happens, because it's going to happen at some stage. When it happens, I'll be uncontactable for about a month.
Just party hard for a good month.
You got it.
That's it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on. It's been an awesome chat. Definitely see eye to eye with you on a lot of different interests and passions. I think it's fantastic, and the Unfiltered podcast I've been loving. I mean, I'm listening to many of the episodes every single week. So keep doing it, and I'd love to maybe even see you get some boxers on there as well. Is that I know you've maybe had 1 or 2 in the past, but would you expand out into boxing?
Looking into it for next year, but probably on a different platform. It would still be under the Unfiltered brand, but I also think it's probably important to know exactly what my audience is and what they want. So maybe we'll see some Unfiltered boxing in 2023 its own brand new entity.
That'd be great. I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for it. So, yeah, thanks again for coming on, and yeah, good go Parramatta for the finals.
Thanks, Will. It's been a pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me on.